Hello, my name is John Petty, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Growing Up in Flip Flops. Today I have a story for you entitled Spring Training. I went to elementary school in a two-story building with no air conditioning in 1960 South Florida. Now, before anyone wonders how a child could possibly learn under such difficult conditions, let me remind you that the school wasn't in session during summer and there was always a breeze coming off the Gulf of Mexico. I don't ever remember being hot, sweaty, or uncomfortable in class. I put the main reason for that being the old Florida design of the buildings with high ceilings, the classrooms facing away from southern exposures, lots of shade around the building, and lots of open windows, and those breezes. While these design elements may have had the benefit of lowering temperatures in the classroom, they had a very different effect on me. I could hear what was happening outside the classroom. I don't just mean birds singing or cars passing. No, there was something much more interesting to me. You see, my elementary school was located about 400 yards from a baseball park that served most importantly as a spring training home of the Pittsburgh Pirates. During the months of February and March, these open windows not only allowed the sounds of birds and cars in, but also the sound of the crack of a bat and the roar of a crowd. That was much more distracting to me than any passing car's honking horn or a police or fire truck siren. And every time I heard the crowds in the park send up a roar, I couldn't help but wonder what was the cause of the cheer. A home run? A double play? A pirate being thrown out at the plate? Which was it? Well, in a baseball obsessed 7-year old's mind, there was only one way of solving that dilemma. I would go to the game and see for myself. There was no sense in waiting for a weekend game and asking my mother to take me. That would never happen. For a second grader, there was a much more simple and direct solution. If I wanted to go to the game, I figured out I'd just wait until recess, then leave and go. And that's exactly what I did. I knew that I wouldn't be back from recess, so as the class was getting ready to go to the playground, I closed my books, closed my notebook, and put it all away under my desk, just as if it was the end of the school day, which for me, at least, it was. When we were let out to the playground, the other children ran to the swing sets or the jungle gyms. I simply walked off the school grounds. No one called out to me, nor did any teacher try to stop me. I just left. I had to walk a couple of blocks and cross a major street. Thankfully, I used the crosswalk and had enough sense to obey the walk, don't walk signal. In short order, I arrived at the ballpark. I had no money, so attempting to buy a ticket was useless. Instead, I used my kids' knowledge of the ballpark, which had been gained by riding my bicycle through the parking lot and all around the stadium during the other 10 months of the year when the Pirates weren't in town. I knew there was a gap in the fence surrounding the park that was outside the view of the ticket office down the left field line. This was my ticket at my personal will call window. The fence had been installed high enough that a skinny 7-year old could slide underneath it. I was under the fence and inside the park in the blink of an eye before anyone could or would have noticed. I brushed myself off and promptly found a seat in the open air bleachers on the left field line. This was a decade before Disney World had been built. Florida during the winter months was still sleepy. Spring training games were lightly attended and primarily by senior citizens, so I was pretty much all by myself in the uncovered left field foul line bleachers. Everyone else was mostly under the cover of the grandstand, so there was virtually no chance of me sitting in someone else's seat, getting found out, and kicked out by an usher. I heard a hot dog vendor calling out to the crowd near me. His shouts were irrelevant to me because I had no money. But his shouts did remind me that I also had skipped lunch in addition to recess and the rest of the school day. Sitting in the shade, someone, probably prompted by his wife, yelled, "Hey kid, are you hungry?" I nodded my head yes and the stranger told the vendor to give the kid a hot dog and a bottle of Coke. The vendor came over to my spot and handed the food and drink to me with a, "Here you go, kid." I turned and acknowledged the kindness from a stranger with a, "Thanks, mister." As I wolfed down the hot dog and Coke, I now saw what generated the sounds I had heard through the window, while the teacher had been talking about penmanship or dividing a word into syllables. And that world in a classroom was 1,000 miles away instead of a couple blocks and 30 minutes ago. Heck, it didn't matter who the Pirates were playing. I wasn't concerned about the nuance that it was just a spring training game. For all I knew, I was at a Major League Baseball game. And now I was in heaven, watching a baseball game with Clemente, Stargell, and Mazeroski. Players that would go on to the Baseball Hall of Fame in the decades to follow, but who I had snuck out of school to see. You may be wondering, did I ever get into trouble for this? Not once. And I did it multiple times. Not a single word ever from either my teacher or my mother. It's still a mystery to me how that could possibly have happened, but something I'm not going to dwell on, because that wasn't a concern then or now. It was just a second grader with a simple desire to see for himself what generated those exciting sounds coming through the open classroom windows. And I found out in the simplest and most direct way possible. I went to the game. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy, give it a positive rating on whatever service you're listening to, and be sure and subscribe. And I'll be back next week again. Thank you so very much.